I remember this person saying, "Oh, wow, you teach storytelling? I always wanted to be a storyteller." Please welcome Dana to the stage.
Yeah, I'm starting to regret that conversation a little bit, just a little bit. Thank you. I can't see you, but thank you so much. I'd love to be able to see you. That'd be awesome. So anyway, hi. I was an Olympic hopeful. The first time I put on a pair of ice skates, I was 5 years old. And honestly, I don't even think my feet touched the ice that day because I was mesmerized by this girl who was skating around. She was beautiful and gliding and jumping, and I just could not take my eyes off her. And I looked at my mom and dad, and I said, I want to do that. I'm 5. And they said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, definitely." So they signed me up for group lessons. Well, it wasn't long into my group lessons that coaches started to realize that ice skating and me kind of agreed a little bit, and I was pretty good. So they suggested that maybe I should get some private lessons. So my mom and dad signed me up for private lessons, and right before I turned 6 years old, I had my first competition, and I skated to the Mickey Mouse Club theme. You remember that one, M-I-C-K-E-Y? That was it. I got last place. It was sad. And I hated that feeling. That feeling was awful, and I just thought to myself, I don't ever want to fail again. And so that began a very long journey into ice skating, and my family just sacrificed so much for me to be able to participate in this sport. And not to mention that it's extremely expensive, but the time that you have to devote, and remember, I'm a kid, so I am needing rides to and from the ice rink, and thank God my mother would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and put on her pajamas and have a couple sips of coffee and take me to the ice rink. And I stepped on the ice at 5 a.m. and got off at 8, and I'd get in the back of the car and change my clothes for school. And I went to a private school because they allowed me to come in late and leave early for my sport, and sometimes even travel for competitions, so that they just sent me with my homework and let me go. And we even, as a family, moved from one city to the other just to be closer to the ice rink. And my sister had to go to a new school, and I guess my mom got an extra 15 minutes of sleep, which was great for her. But they sacrificed so much. And through the years, this was who I was. I was an ice skater, and I was a student. Well, puberty started to catch up with me around 13, and I realized that falling hurts a lot. And I didn't really understand that the injuries that I had sustained were affecting me, and I started to get scared. And once you get fearful of jumping up, turning 3 times in the air, and landing on one foot, that's not a good combination for an ice skater, and certainly kind of ruins any kind of competitive spirit you might have. And so around 14, I skated off the ice one day, looked at my mom and said, "I don't want to do this anymore." And she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." And she canceled the rest of my lessons. And so all of a sudden, I just lost this whole part of me. And I no longer needed to go to the private school because I didn't need those accommodations any longer. And so I decided to try to be a normal kid. I had this really, really overprotective mother. My mom was at every skating lesson. She sat up in the top. If you saw Tanya, you know what I mean. Not quite. She didn't have the bird. But other than that, she was very overprotective, watched me a lot. But she always supported my decisions, thank goodness. And so I decided I wanted to be a normal kid and go to the regular school. And so I went from a class of 32 kids to 975 freshmen. And I'm going through this identity crisis because who am I if I'm not a skater? And now I'm this little fish in a big pond and not really sure what to do with myself. And I was hyperventilating every day on the way to class, and it was just awful. And I started to get really, really depressed and even somewhat suicidal. And so my mom decided that it was important for us to go see a counselor. So we would go to the counselor, and my mom and I would sit down in front of the counselor, and I would tell them my problems and what was going on, and the counselor would process it and look to my mother and say, well, tell me about your childhood. What was yours like? And my mother would just shut down. And we would leave. We wouldn't go back to that therapist. And then we would try another one, same thing. And I never understood why we had to try out all these counselors, but I did finally find one who was interested only in me. And I worked with her for a while. And she was a great help, but as you can imagine, while I'm going through this identity crisis and while I'm depressed and suicidal, my grades suffered as a result. And so I graduated high school with a 1.6 grade point average. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. That's 4.0, 1.6. So we knew there wasn't a college, and I figured that was not even an option for me. And my mother, she wanted me to go to college. She hadn't gone. My dad hadn't gone. She really wanted me to go. And so she went and found a college counselor. I didn't even know these things existed, but they paid this person a lot of money to find a school to take me. There was two, actually, that would allow me in, and I picked the one that was prettiest in Florida. And it's kind of like camp, not like school at all. And so I went there, and I walked in on probation. My parents paid a ton of money, and I walked in on probation because of my grades. And I ended up leaving there with a 3.2 grade point average. I did get a bachelor's degree and actually went on to get a master's degree. And, you know, my mom, it was really important to her for me to know that that GPA did not define who I was. And I never really realized that. I mean, I knew that, you know, for me, the GPA was just reinforcement of being a failure. And so later, I became a mom myself. And one day, I'm having a conversation, probably about, you know, nothing really, and my mother drops this bomb on me. She tells me that she had experienced some very serious trauma as a child. And all of a sudden, things just started to click, right? I understood that she had been carrying this around with her for so long. And she said it like it was almost nothing, but it put together for me all the pieces. I understood finally why she didn't want to talk, why she shut down in front of those therapists, and why it was so important for her to keep her arms around me, keep me safe all the time. And I was thankful, really thankful for her to share that with me. And now, what's ironic about it is that as traumatized as she was and as overprotective as she was, she raised me to be independent. And she raised my sister and I to be vocal. We speak out. We are determined women. And now I have these two beautiful daughters, and I'm hopeful that I'm raising them to realize that a number does not define who they are, that grade point average means nothing. And I hope that I'm giving them that same opportunity to be vocal and strong and determined. But I will tell you that no matter how many times they trip, I'm not going to let them fall. Thanks.